Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will begin in just a moment. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will begin in just a moment. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will begin in just a moment. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will begin in just a moment. Welcome to AJC Europe Connect's today's program. The recent beheading of history teacher Samuel Paty by an Islamist terrorist has sent shockwaves throughout France. Against the backdrop of the trial of the Charlie Hebdo murder, this atrocious act also raised, once again, the issue of the defense of liberties, democratic values, and laïcité, the French version of secularism. By killing a teacher, more than just the horrific act itself, the terrorists also attacked the values of the French Republic and exposed the need to address the failures and flaws in France's fight against Islamist extremism. In such a context, President Macron, after having announced new measures to fight against Islamist separatism, addressed in a landmark speech the government's failures in allowing Islamist extremism to spread. This has been recently followed by a campaign against France initiated by Turkish President Erdogan and calls to boycott French products circulating in the Middle East, to which Paris reacted strongly, with many in Europe and elsewhere standing in solidarity of France. In order to discuss these new developments, we are very pleased to be joined today by Caroline Fourest, a most respected and admired French intellectual. Mrs. Fourest collaborated with Charlie Hebdo as soon as 2004. She also wrote extensively on the most pressing issues in France, such as the rise of Islamism, of the extreme right, but also on universalism and laïcité. She will be in conversation with Simone Rodan-Benzaquen, General Manager of AJC Europe. I remind our audience that questions can be asked through the chat on Zoom. Simone, and you and Mrs. Fourest have the floor.
Thank you very much, Julie. I would like to welcome our viewers around the world, because we really have viewers around the world who are with us today. It is my true pleasure to welcome Caroline Fourest today, who is not only, as Julie just described, a very important personality here in France, but also a personal friend. So this conversation could basically not be more timely given what's going on here. And I'm sure, and actually, I'm sure that Caroline will be able to enlighten us and provide us with a lot of context. Caroline, let me start out with a first very general question. After the murder, the Islamist terrorist murder of Samuel Paty, the history teacher, the widespread demonstration, the ceremony at La Sorbonne, the different declarations by President Macron, by the Interior Minister Darmanin, what is your state of mind? Are you hopeful that things will finally change after basically having shouted and trying to alert public opinion for the past 20 years?
First, thank you, Simone, for having me. Hello to all of you. My state of mind, honestly, I would say that if this fight was only inside our territory, I would be very optimistic, I think. I think we are having a debate in France that is very, of course, intense, alive, sometimes very polemic. But I really truly believe that we start to have also some common understanding about the situation. You can see that, for example, the Mosque of Paris has been very supportive those past days. It's really kind of new. We always had good relationship with the Mosque of Paris, but there is a new leadership, very much more, I would say, brave about those issues, and that's a big change. But not only that, we have a lot of secularist Muslims coming from mostly Algerian backgrounds, but from also Tunisia, from also Morocco, that are today is probably the most brilliant and brave fighters for secularism in France. And they are loud, their voices matters a lot. So I would say with time, patience, and also after defeating ISIS, we would be able, just inside the country, to resist to those threats and probably to move on to a better time. I don't know if it would be soon, but it will be possible. My worry, my biggest anxiety comes from the fact that there is no anymore debate in only one country. It's a worldwide debate. And we can see, especially those past days, we can see the level of lies, manipulation, disinformation, really propagandas that is actually breaking all the work we try to do to have a common understanding about what is the situation, what is the threat, and how to face it. So this is probably what depressed me a little bit.
We'll speak a little bit about those external pressures and the outside debate and the globalized debate in this a little bit further, but I would like our audience sort of nevertheless to allow sort of to understand what the situation is like in France and what sort of the general feeling is. And so I don't know, from my perspective, I don't know if you feel the same way, but there have been other terrorist attacks in the past. But I feel like maybe since 2016, maybe since Nice, I don't think I've seen the country so emotionally, politically affected as today. What is the difference here? Why now? Why the teacher? Why Samuel Paty? Why has it created so much shock here in France?
No, you're right. There is a very special emotion about this terrorist attack. Maybe because the figure of the teacher in France, especially the teacher in public school, is the symbol that united us for centuries. it's thanks to the public schools, the secularist public schools, that we end religious war in this country, religious war for years, for centuries between Protestant and Catholics. It's also the public school, the secularist public school, that helped us in the history of France to promote equality for real. I mean, it was because we said, let's stop to, for example, have crucifix or symbol of Catholicism on the walls of the schools, that we were able to promote education for all without discrimination. That means the Protestants, for example, were not anymore students of a second class. They were students among the other. And I know it's really difficult to understand from overseas, but it's exactly this mentality of protecting, trying to have a safe space, let's say, for citizenship, to promote citizenship for all inside a safe space like public schools, that we also voted a few years ago a law forbidding obvious religious signs with this mentality that has absolutely not been understood, especially in USA, but not only in UK, everywhere. The mentality was that we need that safe space where we are all seen equals, where we can all debate about everything, to learn citizenship. And after that, when we became an adult, we can basically be reactionary, we can be bigots, we can be whatever we want, but at least we have this common language to continue to speak together, to not be completely divided. So when a young terrorist kills a teacher, is actually killing union, this desire of being united, of being reconciliated somehow. So I think this is why we are shocked, probably.
So would you, going into the concept of laïcité, or as we say in secularism, but I think there's also a problem of language where sometimes there's a misunderstanding of what it actually is. In a few words, how would you describe laïcité? I hear sometimes from scholars trying to explain it to American audiences, for example, is to say the difference between the French and the general other secularism is that the French try to protect themselves from religion. Is that accurate?
I think it's very difficult when it comes to understand each other from USA and France about secularism and laïcité, because exactly of this opposite history somehow. We won our liberties from religion by resisting to religion and by resisting to the Catholic Church mostly. And in USA, you can say that somehow secularism also have been put in place to protect religious freedom. Honestly, if you read Jefferson, Jefferson is very close to what we can call laïcité in France. He wanted that in USA too. He wanted public schools to be the places to promote citizenship and unity between citizens, and he wanted a clear separation between politics and religion. Probably if been too optimistic for USA because of the history of the religious persecution and the fact that many groups were escaping from religious persecution, but to be free to be religious in another country, it changed the mood and it changed the history and it changed the look, the gaze about all of this. At the end, I think we can have somehow a common understanding about the necessity to protect religion from political instrumentalization, and also politics from religious or fanatics instrumentalization. That's something that we should share at least. But it's interesting because when it comes to resist to totalitarianism, usually it's quite easy to understand each other between American, for example, and French. When it comes to resist to religious totalitarianism, it becomes more difficult. But there is another, more than a philosophical misunderstandings that exist, obviously. We also have a different situation, different context, is sometimes completely different. For example, we have to keep in mind that in USA today, the biggest threat in terms of terrorist attacks are white supremacists. It's almost 80 to 90% of the terrorist attacks. We are living in France at the exact opposite. 90% of, even more, the terrorist attacks we are facing are from the Islamist groups, jihadist groups. So even if we also have an extreme right problem, it's a political one. That doesn't mean at all that we will never have racist terrorist attacks one day in France. We all fear it, actually. It can happen. But today, the situation is that we have Islamist terrorist attacks almost every month, every 2 months. It's enormous. I mean, it's not 9/11 every 2 months, but it's really shocking. And it's exhausting the society, and everybody is losing patience. And we have to face and we have to resist to, on one side, the people who don't want to hear about it, who prefer to look in a different direction because they fear so much racism that they don't want to speak about fanatism. And at the same time, and that's my approach, and we are many on that approach because I've studied on extreme right and National Front for years, so I really went to that conclusion that it's absolutely not the solution to not be brave in front of jihadism or Islamism, the totalitarian ideology that is behind. We need to face it from the left, from secularism, from a very peaceful point of view. If not, if we don't do that, if we are cowards, or not precise, or not brave, then the extreme right can use it politically, and then we will have the equivalent of a Donald Trump in France, which is basically what we want absolutely to avoid.
Now, Islamism has been a problem in most of Western Europe. It's not just France, it's Belgium, it's Germany, it's the United Kingdom. But no country has had more Islamist attacks than France. How do you explain this?
It can be seen as a weakness. I truly believe that is the result of the fact that we are actually addressing those issues instead of ignoring them. That means that we have, first there is the quantity question. We have truly a very high level of radicals on our soil, on our ground. We are speaking about at least 8,000 radicals who have been monitored by the secret services, even more, maybe 22,000, but 8,000 really extremely dangerous. So every time there is a controversy, every time there is a public debate, every time there is a group that who can say, you should now strike, you should do a terrorist attack, we have this army, let's say shadow army, that can awake and strike. But if you look at what we faced, you said it, Simone, everywhere in the world, in every street of every countries in the world, including and mostly Muslim countries, you can be killed by jihadism. You can be a victim of a terrorist attack. The specificity of Algeria and France, maybe we are the two countries, we have this in common, is that because we don't consider that the fight is only about terrorism, but it's also against the ideology, this totalitarian ideology that every time renew the problem and the danger. We also are victim and targeted because of our values, our principles. So for example, if you go back to the beginning of the last terrorist attack, we should all remember that one of the first symbolic ones we had was not a journalist, it was not a teacher, it was just Jew children in 2012. Jew children being killed in front of their schools, a Jewish school, because they were Jewish. We are, and I do believe it's not only in France, but we are very aware and we don't look in a different direction, we are confronted to a very high level of anti-Semitism in our country. To give you, because I don't know if it is clear in the mind of people who are written day after day that in France we are facing an anti-Muslims racism. It's true. But the anti-Jewish hate crimes in France are 2 times more than the anti-Muslim hate crimes, after 300 deaths and more than 20 terrorist attacks launched by Islamism. So you have to realize the problem. We know that the Islamist propaganda we try to defeat by addressing those issues, by debating, by promoting laïcité, also by fighting discrimination, but it's not the only key. You can fight against all the discrimination in the world. You have to face the fact that there is people who are racist, anti-Semite, anti-Jewish, because they are fanatics. And they are fanatics because not only because of the French model, especially not because of laïcité, no, they are racist and fanatics because they are brainwashed through the internet by radical groups, by radical preachers, by radical NGOs that pretends to fight, for example, against Islamophobia, that pretends to be anti-racist, and who are in reality, truly fanatics and Islamists. So this is actually what we try to do, having a debate and counter back at the right place. That means fighting against discrimination. Of course, we all want to do that. We continue to do that, but it's not the only key. We need to fight against this ideology, this fanaticism, this propaganda, this manipulation, those, again, fake news. Sorry, because they are using it. It's not only Trump who are using the fake news. There is the extreme right, the white supremacists, but also the white Islamist, the supremacist Islamists are using also the same kind of manipulation to radicalize the young generation, and it works. So we need to create a shield of smartness, pedagogy, precision of thinking, critical thinking, to protect this generation from this manipulation.
Caroline, given the reactions not only in France but also in the rest of the world about France's approach, how do you fight Islamism without giving the impression that you are not targeting Muslims, that you are not targeting Islam, that you're not trying to attack them? Is there more we can do? Is there better we can do? Or is it really just a matter of manipulation from organizations, from foreign countries? What is the mechanism here?
That's a really good question, Simone. But honestly, every time I give you just my example. I'm written books about those subjects. You reminded it since 20 years. I wrote books against Marine Le Pen. I wrote books against extreme right for years and Catholic fanaticism. And I did exactly the same job about Islamism with the same precision. I would say even with more precision, being very careful, always reminding in every public debate, in every books, in every documentaries, the difference between Islam and Islamism, to not create any confusion. And still when we are doing it, there is NGOs, there is liars, there is preacher, there is propagandists who can still confuse this work, the work of all the leftist secularists, the leftist, the Charlie Hebdo left, as we call it in France, with a racist or Islamophobic approach. And the problem is mostly this word. Islamophobia is the biggest ally this word is the biggest ally with the Islamists for the Islamist propaganda. It has been actually launched by Islamist groups for that since the Rushdie affair. Since Salman Rushdie have been targeted, at the beginning it was targeted for being blasphematory. But then the fanatics group realized that they were losing the left. Only the most fanatics were ready to threat a writer for being blasphematory. At the minute they decided to use the word, no, but it's not only against religion, is not only that we are offended as religious, is Islamophobic. At the minute they used this word, they started to win some allies among the left. That is actually, that's those allies of the Islamists coming from the woke left, let's say, to synthesize. That is confusing Islam and Islamism. We have this problem today. Inside the extreme left and more, we have people, we don't do the difference between targeting fanatism, targeting totalitarian extreme right ideology in the name of Islamism, and targeting Muslims. And because sometimes they are using this word Islamophobia, that in itself confuses the critique of the religion with incitement to hatred toward Muslims, with anti-Muslims bigotry. And I know that anti-Muslim bigotry is a long word. This is why we're losing the battle too. But this word is precise. This word is the good one. We don't want to, again, being most of the people who have been targeted those past years being called Islamophobes, and today being called Islamophobe can get you killed. This accusation is killing. We have to realize that. It's not anymore fatwa saying, kill this guy. No, it's enough to say on social network, this person, this public figure, or this teacher, it happens with Samuel Paty, is Islamophobe, and you have the risk to find a crazy ones who can kill him. So
and these are usually not people, and these are usually not people you say who are anti-Muslim racist or anti-Muslim bigots, but just people who are criticizing or mocking or being blasphemous against a religion or multiple religions.
Exactly. Actually, it's a little bit like all the campaigns against cultural appropriation, strangely, are not targeting real racists or people who really want to explode the culture. It's more and more targeting anti-racist artists who are just inspired by other culture. It's exactly the same with the word Islamophobia. Most of the people who have been called Islamophobes those days, or since the Rushdie affair, actually, so it's not those days only, are not the real racists, are not the anti-Muslims bigots. And there is a lot of people who are racist against Muslims that we should all fight together. No, Islamophobes, it's really a word used by fanatics to target secularists, to target feminists, to target people who are absolutely not racist, but who are a problem because they are criticizing fanatism, some political instrumentalization of the religion.
You are reading, I know, the American and the English-speaking press quite a bit. And I know you've been upset, let's put it that way, by some of the coverage from the English-speaking paper. What is it you think that some Americans, some English-American speaking press either don't want to understand or really don't understand about France, and what is your message to them?
You're a very polite woman, Simone. So when you say upset, it's really polite. To be really you are a diplomat. To be really honest, strangely, since this last murder, since the murder of Mr. Paty, this emotion about the absolute dishonesty absolute, I mean, it's a shame. The way that some newspaper, American newspaper, are covering France about those issues is just a shame. It's just putting all of us at risk. It's just helping the Islamist soft power. It's just helping manipulation like the one we are facing today. That means a boycott campaign launched by Erdogan and Turkey against France, that now is winning some other countries, has been helped by lies we read almost now every week in the New York Times or in the Washington Post, probably the worst today. And it's not new. It's not new. I face that, and I am upset with that since the cartoons affair in 2006, because at that time I was working at Charlie Hebdo. And I was the one trying to explain, trying to explain what Charlie Hebdo was doing to the American and the English press. You cannot imagine the level of dishonesty and violence we faced from our colleagues from that press. Because we knew at that time already that it was a question of security for us, safety really, to be understood by worldwide. Again, I remind you the context. We were just republishing the Danish cartoons, because at that time, the Danish citizens were under death threats all over the world, but especially in Syria and in Iran, by angry mob manipulated by the Syrian and the Iranian regime that use that pretext. Really, it's a pure political instrumentalization, as it is now with Turkey, exactly the same story. It's exactly happening the same. They use those Danish cartoons published in a very specific context, trying to promote the life of Prophet Muhammad and find a cartoonist for that. They use a context to break the auto-censorship, because all the cartoonists in Denmark at that time were afraid of being killed by, like Theo van Gogh in Holland. They have been under death threat. In France, because of this worldwide polemic, embassy burning, Danish flags burning, we decided in Charlie Hebdo to show those cartoons, to inform, only to do our journalist job, just to be journalists. And plus creating and drawing new cartoons, like the one of Cabu, denouncing the instrumentalization of Mohammed by the fanatics. It's a pure anti-racist cartoon. For that, my colleagues and friends have been killed. But they have not been killed only by fool fanatics. They would not have been killed if all the journalists of the world would have done their job, would have explained in English, and not only in French, in English, that those cartoons were not made to provoke, were not made to incite to hatred. They were absolutely, absolutely empty of any anti-Muslim bigotry. Those cartoons were made to inform and defend freedom of speech. But the problem is that we've been very, very alone to defend freedom of speech and the freedom of press. And at that time already, the New York Times, I remind it so much. The New York Times correspondent in Paris wrote papers I still cannot believe. They were all fake, wrong. They were manipulated. It was absolutely not the context, the intention, and the facts that we were living, that we were facing. My hope was that with time, especially after the terrorist attack against Charlie Hebdo, the 7th January 2015, my hope was, okay, they're going to change, they're going to learn. They will realize that they put all of us at risk, that now that my colleagues are dead, they will work more. They will try to not see the French reality, the French debate with the American eyes, and they will try to explain to the worldwide public the complexity of what we try to do, that again, meaning defending freedom of speech, freedom to be journalist without being under death threat, because some fanatics of ISIS or some from Pakistan decide that we are not allowed to draw Mohammed. Charlie Hebdo is an atheist satirical newspaper cannot be ruled by Pakistan or ISIS. It's impossible. If we accept that, there is no liberty anywhere in the world. If you can be intimidated and bullied through angry fanatics mobs from Pakistan, Syria, no matter the country, including in France, in a secularist country, in a secularist democracy, there is no more secularism and there is no more democracy. Just for defending that, we have been under threats. People have been killed. A teacher now has been killed for exactly the same reason, for explaining that. And still, what is written in the New York Times and what is written in the Washington Post those last days, that the problem is France, that the problem is French secularism, that Macron is going, I read that in the Washington Post, that Macron is going to attack Muslim organization and dissolve Muslim organization. This is absolutely a shame. Nobody is going to fight against Muslims organization in France. The decision is just to regulate some fanatic Islamist groups, not Muslims. Again, this confusion from a journalist is unacceptable. Islamist groups that are part of the threats against Samuel Paty. It's not explained in the Washington Post. You have another paper from the same journalist, James Macaulay, the worst correspondent in Paris we had since years. The same explains that in France, instead, this is the title, instead of fighting systemic racism, Macron want to reform Islam. All of this is a nonsense. How you can put in a competition in the same title, the fact that you have to choose between fighting racism or fighting against Islamism. Of course, we want to do both. It's not the same subject. So if you want to put them in competition, that means that this journalist of the Washington Post is very clear about that. He wants to fight only racism and not fight fanatism. That is, he himself is calling fighting against Muslims groups. And nobody wants to reform Islam from the state. Nobody. We are just hoping to promote the most modernist Muslims, the reformist Muslims, because they need help. They are targeted today by the Islamists.
Thank you, Caroline. Again, I think this is why having these conversations is so important, because sometimes it's because there is cultural misunderstanding, because sometimes we look through our own focal lenses. So I think this is why this kind of dialogue between both sides of the Atlantic is so important. Caroline, let me ask you one final question, because before I leave it to the audience. How concerned are you that what's currently going on in the Middle East with boycotting French goods, with the kind of declarations by President Erdogan, how concerned are you that this is going to have an impact on everybody's lives here in France?
It reminds me very much the cartoons affair. It's exactly the same process. Again, at the beginning, the cartoons who have been published in Denmark, there were no polemic at all. It's a single radical preacher from Syria living in Denmark that he went to the Islamic conference. He confused false drawing with real drawings, and he created a worldwide polemic. And then two states, Syria and Iran, took the bait and used this very small Danish polemic for their political purpose. We are facing the same, except now, today. We know that the Turkish president, Erdogan, is trying to, and he has no more time for that, because he knows that at the moment there is a new president in USA, the game will be different. Erdogan knows that under Trump's time, he can do whatever he wants. He has this leverage on Trump that we will understand one day, clearly. He has this leverage. He obtained from Donald Trump already a wild card to fight against the Kurds. our allies in northern Syria. He did a massacre there thanks to the Trump's authorization. Now he's fighting against the Armenian, and I can say I'm really surprised that the American left during this campaign is not pointing it, is not saying that it's also Donald Trump who is allowing Erdogan to make those attacks against the Christian in Armenia today, because he feels free. And he's also trying to create a disturbance in Mediterranean Sea, because we know that he's threatening to invade some territories of Greece for pure economic interest. And there is one country today that is resisting, it's France. France and a little bit the European Union, not resisting too much, unfortunately, really not too much, but it's enough to get him really mad. So what is happening today is that the Turkish president is using the beheading of a teacher in the name of Islam, is using some NGOs he's financing for years, NGOs called Collective Against Islamophobia, against his Islamophobia organization. This organization that has been invited in many, many English and American media to speak about the French situation is an NGO promoted, financed, and helped by the Muslim Brother Network and by Erdogan network to destabilize France, to destabilize Europe. And this is what is going on, because they launch a call for a boycott. Now Qatar, of course, Qatar is also part of financing those Muslim Brother organization, is taking also the lead on that. And now some Arab countries will follow. I'm not so, finally to answer you, Simone, I'm not so worried about the boycott. Okay, they will boycott some cheese and maybe some luxury bags, not for long, don't worry about that, don't worry too much. It's not what worries me for real. The problem is that today, Erdogan is pointing at the French President Emmanuel Macron as a target. He's keep repeating that he's an enemy of Islam. So my big worry is that we're going to have a new terrorist attack in this country, new other deaths. And I'm really, really, really worried about some attacks against politicians in France.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I will just ask, Brigitte, you have to switch off your sound. Thank you. I will ask Julie now to take the questions from the audience. I can see that they're coming from all over the place. We have probably too many and we won't be able to answer all of them, but Julie, please go ahead.
Thank you, Simone. Yes, that's true. Thank you to our audience, because we received many, many questions. So I will do my best and maybe try to regroup some of them. We are going to start out with our first question, which was on the public school in France. The question basically is by Diane Kaplan. How do you promote the French ideals in public schools, and especially to Islamist children, and in what measure, to what extent are Islamist children also educated in the public French schools?
Yes, thank you for your question. Of course, this is also the beauty of the secularist public schools in France. And you have to understand is the majority of the schools. There is private schools, but they are more expensive, and the public school is really, really cheap. And it's quite good, actually. It's a quite good school. So many children from minorities, especially Muslim children, are going to the public schools. Even if we ban religious signs, etc., they prefer public schools because it's cheap and it's good education. So they go to public schools, and this is exactly why it's so frustrating and we are getting so emotional about the beheading of Mr. Paty, Samuel Paty, because he was doing exactly what we all dream. He was giving this very smart, actually, lesson about freedom of speech, about the importance of freedom of information, about the art of caricature, to explain that is a liberty and not at all hate speech, and not at all something to mock Muslims. This is what he was trying to explain in his classroom. And the fact that he has been killed by a jihadist for that, because of, again, disinformation, manipulation, and terrorist groups, is what makes us very sad, because this is exactly, this lesson has been designed and reinforced after the terrorist attack against Charlie Hebdo. And we know that children inside this classroom didn't attack Mr. Paty. They are mourning, they are in tears. We actually had this interview with a very, very smart young student of Mr. Paty. Is a young boy. You coming from clearly a very poor background. Is an orphan, actually, an orphan, a black young orphan, very smart, that mourn Mr. Paty more than all of us, and explain in front of a camera how much his class was interesting, was fantastic, and that he understood completely that drawings, laughing about the fanatics is not mocking the Muslims. So that works. It works. When you have children of good faith in a safe space like a school, a public school, it works. The problem is, again, the propaganda coming from outside, coming inside the smartphone, coming through the internet and the social network, that is killing that work.
Thank you. We have another question, which can maybe be seen as a follow-up question from Fred Samuelon. To what level are Muslim leaders in France making efforts to fight terrorism and racism? What impact is it having?
We have, again, I would not say Muslim leaders only, it's more large than that, because you have to understand we have two different kind of immigration. There is the economic immigration and there is the political immigration. For example, all the Algerians who went to France after the Islamist attacks in the 90s in Algeria, they went to escape from jihadism. They went in France, they arrived in France because they really care about laïcité, because they love laïcité and this freedom of speech. They are the best fighters we have here. All of my friends, almost all of my good friends I'm fighting against Islamism are from Algeria or Iran or Muslim countries. So this is our strength, actually. Regarding the religious leaders, let's say they are religious leaders. You cannot expect too much, honestly. They are brave, but sometimes they are very, very, of course, they are mourning after every terrorist attacks. But the other time, during the year, sometimes they're not brave enough. But still, some are. For example, we have an imam, very brave, Hassan Chalgoumi. He denounced anti-Semitism and the fanatism since years, but he's under police protection because he's attacked by not Muslim, by Islamists preachers, by Islamist groups, like the one who attacked this teacher, the Sheikh Yassin NGO. It's a pro-Hamas organization. He was the same guy who attacked for years this imam that attacked this teacher. So now this is actually this NGO that Macron wants to dissolve legally, because again, they are actually killing the resistance, including from Muslims. So this is why it's absolutely not about Muslims organization, but about Islamist organization. But we have honestly, we have a lot of allies if they are not bullied by the Islamists. And we want to protect the Muslims from the Islamist bullies. This is exactly the purpose of the actual law against separatism.
Thank you. Several people asked about the fact that France has not banned the whole of Hezbollah. So do you see that the fact that the political wing has not been banned as something that can contribute to local terrorism? And is there any link with some forms of anti-Semitism in France?
We have groups, they are more pro-Hamas than especially Hezbollah, but still we have both. And this is exactly the kind of groups that we should now seriously consider to regulate through this law against separatism. And yes, of course, there is a link with anti-Semitism, a strong link. All of this Islamist propaganda is based on Plotism and anti-Semitism. Of course, they are also homophobic and also sexist, but the basis is to be anti-Jew. So this is why it's so frustrating when we read inside again, democratic American press, the fact that it's racist to resist to those racist groups. They are the most racist groups we have in France. And we just try to resist to this incitement to hatred because it's killing Jew in France. It's killing a lot of citizens. Jew, teacher, journalist, drawer, cartoonist, and we cannot go without resisting, without counting back.
Let me just remind the audience that the collective Sheikh Yassin is under the name of Sheikh Yassin, the former leader of Hamas, an organization that is banned by the European Union and consequently also France. Sorry, Julie.
Thank you. I'm reading now the question of Benoit Casals, saying, I'm worried about the city of Montpellier because Islamist propaganda highlights the images of the town hall with the Charlie Hebdo caricatures. Does the intelligence seems prepared to prevent an attack?
We honestly, even if the target is just a city, it will be okay. The problem we've got today is that there is so many persons under police protection. My big concern is about again political targets. There will be. So we know now, I hope we know, we start to learn from everything we've been through, that there is on one side a communique from Al-Qaeda since the beginning of the trial of the murderers of Charlie Hebdo. There is this communique from Al-Qaeda saying, strike France. And on the other hand, we know that to choose the targets, it's on social networks, that the young radicals are choosing their targets regarding the level of hate and the campaign against Islamophobes. There is one source of optimism, if I can add, one source of optimism. The difference between the last two terrorist attacks with the previous ones, with the Bataclan, with the Charlie Hebdo one, and many we had before, is that it's not first, is not organized group. There is no weapons because we reinforce the fight against terrorism to prevent that, because ISIS is not anymore in situation of giving orders. There is only Al-Qaeda now, and Al-Qaeda is not exactly the same level of strength than before. So the two last terrorists, the first one was a young Pakistani boy, almost also the same age as the last one, 17 or 18 years old. This young Pakistani boy didn't grow, he was not raised in France. He just arrived 2 years ago from Pakistan and probably has been radicalized by Pakistani group, Pakistani preachers, and maybe reading some false news in English media. Sorry about France, it didn't help. The last one, the young Chechen, 18 years old, has been radicalized through probably Russian Islamists from overseas, and also, again, propaganda and social network coming from this collective, the Sheikh Yassin collective that we try to now regulate, and also from the collective against Islamophobia that help this mood, and all those NGOs that are pointing to people calling them Islamophobes.
Thank you. Our next question is, what is your advice for Germany handling what is called their legalistic Islamism? So Islamists that on the surface are saying all the right things and come across as moderate, but beneath this surface are receiving money from foreign governments, Turkey, Iran, etc., or are part of the Muslim Brotherhood. What is your advice on how to deal with them, especially for elected officials in the government? Should they talk to them, and would there be any benefit of doing that?
It's a very good question. This is the most difficult part in resisting to Islamism. I am a specialist of all kinds of extremism. I worked on extreme right, I worked on the American religious rights, I worked on neo-Nazis, white supremacists. I can tell you the most difficult network to resist is Islamism because of this duplicity, because of that especially. I'm talking about the most dangerous of all of them is the Muslim Brothers. The Muslim Brotherhood network is the most dangerous since ages in the world because they are strategists, because they know how to lie, because they know how to have a branch that is polite enough and present very well in the media to talk with the institution, with governments. Then they can have this surface, they can have allies, they can recruit. And they have another branch, very discreet or secret, that is more radical, and that branch is there to strike. And when there is a problem, when there is an attack, when there is a violent event, then the political branch arrive and propose to be, let's say, to be the diplomat in the situation, the one we should consider, the one we should listen to learn what to do. They are working this way, the Muslim Brotherhood Network, since years, not only in Europe. They've done that in many Muslim countries before. And we have to learn from it. It's enough. This is the most dangerous strategy. It's enough to talk with them. It's enough to believe their lies. We really need to support the real secularist Muslims. And sometimes they are not religious. Sometimes they are just citizens from a Muslim background, but they are the allies. They are those who can help us in that story. Helping the Muslim brothers, helping the false reformists, the false modernists, the one who smile on TV but attacked in their mosque, in their networks, these secularist Muslims who are brave. It's dangerous. And government and politicians should definitely stop instrumentalizing them because they are organized, because they can get them elected. They should definitely isolate them, pointing at them and not helping them and not financing them, especially. And we should find a way to stop those fundings coming from overseas to these groups.
Thank you, Julie. I think we have time for one more question.
Perfect. In a recent interview for L'Express, you said that France is amongst the rare countries to look fanaticism into the eyes. And you spoke about the absolute need to be proud of our value. What would you like to say to the youth in France and in other democratic countries?
This is my obsession, talk to the youth. And be brave. Be brave. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid of thinking, and speak freely, because there will be always someone who will try to bully you. I mean, the youth is growing on social networks those days. It's their real school, more than any public or private schools we can create. Their school is the social networks, and the social network are a space where all the bullies can be there, can silence you. There is mobs that are ready to attack you at any pretext. If you are called anything, you can be chased, you can be bullied. So they are growing with this fear of being brave. And if the schools, if the media, if the journalists and the teachers are not speaking very loudly about defending free speech, defending the fact that we need more critical thinking and that we need to learn it in the media, at the university, that the schools and the university must be safe space, not for identities, intimidation and censorship, but safe space for debate and critical thinking and freedom of speech, then we are lost. We're going to be polarized by the social network. We will end in a place where there will be no option between hate and identity and fanatism. This is what we try to avoid here. This is why we want to defend the fact that there is another way to resist, a way that is defending freedom of speech, freedom, values, and being proud of being universalist, being proud of being Democrats, being proud of being patient, peaceful, but very, very still, very determined, very strong people with strong belief. It's not neutrality. We're not there to accept everything. We are there to defend what is the heart of liberty.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Really, thank you so much for having taken the time. I know how busy you are. You've been all over the place, all over French media, trying to, do what you do, incite people to think and speak out. I know you've also spoken to the American press, so really thank you for having taken the time. I hope that it has provided our listeners, our auditors, a little bit more context, a little bit food for thought. This is why we're here. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to build bridges and make people understand. And if there are misunderstandings, try and rectify them. So really, thank you so much, Caroline.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you to our global audience for joining us today. If you enjoyed this program, please consider making a donation to AJC at ajc.org/donate. Our next program will take place tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. European Time, and will feature a timely debate on the state of anti-Semitism in America. For more information and to register, please visit ajc.org and our social media. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much.